She woke up to the smell of sizzling bacon and the soft hum of morning sunlight spilling through her window. At first, she thought she was dreaming, but then she saw him, her boss, the CEO she had only ever seen in stiff meetings and behind glass doors, standing in her kitchen, carefully flipping pancakes and humming a tune. She rubbed her eyes, thinking she must have wandered into some parallel universe where the powerful and untouchable could just cook breakfast. As a single mother, mornings were always chaotic, rushing her kids to school, juggling bills, and trying to find even a moment to breathe. And here was this man, the one she had barely spoken to, moving around her small kitchen like he had always belonged there. Her heart raced, confusion and curiosity colliding in a whirlwind. Then he turned toward her, holding a plate with a warm smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I thought you could use a little help today," he said. Those words hung in the air, heavy and unexpected. She froze, unsure whether to speak, scream, or just run. What he said next made her blood run cold, and she couldn't believe what was coming. Her mind raced as she tried to make sense of the scene before her. The CEO, someone she had only ever seen in sleek suits and boardrooms, was in her tiny kitchen, apron tied around his waist, the smell of coffee filling the air. She glanced around, half expecting this to be some elaborate prank, but everything looked real. Her cluttered counter, the half-empty cereal box, the stacks of school papers she had been meaning to organize. She remembered the countless late nights at the office, the endless meetings where he seemed untouchable, completely out of reach, and now, here he was, in the most ordinary part of her life, doing something so personal that it felt almost invasive. Why would he show up here, of all places? Her heart pounded as questions raced through her mind. He set the plate down in front of her, his expression unreadable. "I know things have been tough," he said, his voice quieter than she had ever heard it in the office. She wanted to ask how he even knew about her struggles, about the late nights and the bills and the moments she thought no one noticed. But before she could speak, he added something that made her stomach twist, and the tension in the room thickened, leaving her unsure whether to be afraid or completely stunned. She sank into the chair, her hands trembling slightly as she tried to steady her breathing. The room felt smaller, the air heavier, as if the walls themselves were listening. Part of her wanted to scream, to demand answers, but another part, a cautious, guarded part, warned her to stay quiet. After all, this was the man who controlled so much of her professional life, and now he was in her personal space, crossing a line she didn't even know existed. Her mind flicked back to the past few months, the late projects, the endless pressure, the feeling that no one truly noticed her effort. Yet here he was, in her kitchen, acting as if he had seen everything. Was this some twisted way of asserting control, or something else entirely? The kids' laughter from the next room pulled her attention, reminding her that life didn't pause for confusion or fear. He moved to the counter, arranging more breakfast with precise, almost meticulous care. "I didn't come here to interfere," he said quietly, "but sometimes we have to step into the spaces no one expects us to." She wanted to ask what he meant, but his gaze stopped her, sharp and intense. As though he could read her thoughts, her phone buzzed with a message from work, urgent, demanding, but she couldn't move. Something about this moment, this intrusion, hinted at a bigger story, one that tangled her career, her family, and her own sense of trust in ways she couldn't yet untangle. She watched him quietly, her mind spinning faster than the morning sunlight sliding across the floor. Every movement he made seemed deliberate, calculated, yet strangely familiar, as if he belonged in this space more than she did. Her chest tightened. Why was he here? What did he really want? The questions twisted in her mind, each one heavier than the last. The kids peeked around the corner, eyes wide at the unusual sight of the CEO making breakfast in their home. Their innocent curiosity only added to the tension, and she felt the weight of responsibility pressing down. How could she explain this? Could she even trust him in her house? In her life? He placed a plate in front of one of the kids and smiled, a small gesture that somehow carried more meaning than words. Then he turned back to her, his expression unreadable. "There are things you don't know, things I can't explain right now," he said, his voice low, almost urgent. She felt a shiver run down her spine, realizing that whatever this was, it went far beyond pancakes and coffee. Her phone buzzed again, a reminder of her world outside this surreal morning, but she didn't reach for it. Instead, she leaned forward slightly, drawn in by a mixture of fear, curiosity, and disbelief. And then, just as she opened her mouth to speak, he said something so unexpected, so impossible, that it left her frozen, staring at him, unable to move or even think clearly, the suspense hanging like a storm cloud over everything. She thought she knew. Her eyes widened as his next words cut through the tension like a knife. "There's something you need to see," he said, reaching into his pocket and pulling out a small envelope. The sight of it made her stomach drop. She hadn't expected secrets, not in her own kitchen, not from the person she thought she knew, only in professional terms. He placed the envelope on the table, pushing it gently toward her. "Open it," he said, his tone calm but firm, like he had rehearsed this moment 100 times. She hesitated, heart hammering. Something about his presence, the way he moved, the quiet authority in his voice, made her feel both trapped and drawn in. She tore the seal slowly, the paper trembling in her hands, and her eyes scanned the contents. Her breath caught. It was a letter, but not just any letter. It idealed things about her past, her struggles, even details about her kids that no one should have known. Questions she hadn't even dared to ask suddenly screamed in her mind. How did he get this? Why was he showing it to her now? Was he helping her, or was this some kind of trap? Before she could react, a knock came at the door, sharp and urgent. Her heart leaped. Who could it be at this hour? And how did it tie into the impossible morning she was already living? The tension in the room skyrocketed, leaving her frozen, the envelope burning in her hands. As the unknown consequences of opening it began to press down on her, she froze as the knock on the door grew louder. Urgent, almost desperate. The CEO glanced at her, his expression unreadable, then moved toward the door with a deliberate calmness that made her heart race. She followed, clutching the envelope, still unsure whether she wanted to see what Torhu was on the other side. When the door swung open, it wasn't who she expected. Standing there was a lawyer she had met only once months ago, holding yet another envelope. "I'm here on behalf of your children," the lawyer said, eyes flicking to the CEO. "You need to see this immediately." Her hands shook as she took the documents, realizing they contained proof that could change her life, hidden benefits she never knew about, legal protections for her children, and even evidence that the CEO had quietly been helping her behind the scenes, making sure she could survive without ever asking. She looked at him, disbelief and gratitude mixing with lingering fear. "All this? For me?" she whispered. He nodded, finally letting a small, genuine smile break through. "You've been doing everything on your own," he said. "I just wanted to make sure you didn't have to." Just as relief began to wash over her, her phone buzzed again. The screen showed a message from an unknown number. Asterisk, "You don't know the full story yet. Be careful who you trust." Her breath caught. The calm she felt was fleeting, and she realized that even though the main conflicts had been addressed, a new, deeper mystery was just beginning. She sank onto the edge of the kitchen chair, letting out a long breath she hadn't realized she was holding. The chaos of the morning, the unexpected breakfast, the envelopes, the secrets finally settled into a strange, quiet clarity. Her children peeked around the corner again, curious but sensing the shift in her energy. She smiled at them, a smile that felt lighter than it had in months. The CEO stood quietly, giving her space, no longer the intimidating figure from the office, but just a man who had stepped into her life when she least expected it. She realized that what had seemed intrusive at first had actually been a gesture of understanding, of respect, and of support she had never asked for but desperately needed. The documents confirmed that she had safety nets she didn't know about, that her children were protected, and that she wasn't truly alone in her struggles. As she looked around her small kitchen, the sun streaming in, and the aroma of pancakes lingering in the air, she felt a new sense of possibility. Life wasn't perfect, but it was full of unexpected help, small kindnesses, and moments that could change everything. Her phone buzzed again, but this time she didn't rush to it. She smiled softly, realizing that trust, courage, and resilience often arrived in the most surprising forms and, sometimes, a simple breakfast could be the start of an entirely new chapter.